Well, hi, everybody. I'm delighted to be here. Um, some of you may know I have been teaching on Zoom once a month for Ikar Shabbat morning. And before that, I was teaching in person, and I'm looking forward to doing that again. So, what I want to do today for the Parsha is something I did last year at about this time, but I'm looking at things a lot differently this year. And I know it's really wonderful, rich material. I hope you like it. I'm not a rabbi. I'm a historian, and I'm a historian, and so my focus is on what literature meant at the time it was composed, which was likely in oral form, and then later written, and then later revised into its final place in the larger text. And as a historian, I know we cannot know exactly what it meant at the time. We can approximate, we can speculate, but we try to marshal evidence for it. But I'm also a modern liberal Jew, meaning I'm free to apply these lessons as I see fit. And I want to find personal meaning in them. I accept that others can draw their own conclusions also. I'm not going to be dogmatic about it. So, what I want to do with Parshat Akab is to just start by looking at the language of the opening passage. Um, and, okay, I'm not having a good, okay, full screen. I want to start with that opening passage. So this is Sepharia. In Sepharia, you can see Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 20. And I'll just read this one. Later on, I'll have others of you read it. And the beginning, I really want to focus a lot of my attention on that beginning passage. If you do obey these rules and observe them carefully, the Lord your God will maintain faithfully for you the covenant that he made on oath with your fathers. Now, if you look at the Hebrew, what you're going to see is the second word is akev, which is the word I want to focus on. It's sort of a strange word because it's a preposition, akev tishme'un, before you hear. Now, if you look at the English, you don't get any sense of how weird that is. Akev is from a body part. It's from the word for heel, a cave. And there's something about heels that is really crucial to the lesson of the whole portion. So I want to look at where we find the word heels in the Torah, because that also gives us a clue. So the first reference to heel is about the snake. So would someone like to read? Jess, how do we call on someone to read?
Yeah, folks want to raise their hand either virtually or
And read Genesis
person.
3:15.
Have any takers?
Okay, I'll read it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. Eva ashit banecha uvein haisha uvein zarecha uvein zar'a hu yishufcha rosh ve'et tishufena akev. I'll put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. They shall strike at your head, and you shall strike at their heel.
Yeah, okay. Let's get out of Sfaria for a minute. So, or the thing, so I can look at who I'm talking to. Thank you. There's something is at the very, very beginning. This is the curse that was given after Adam and Eve ate of the fruit of the garden when the snake first befriended Eve, and she was convinced by the snake to eat the fruit, and then they ate, and they were forced out of the garden and so on. But so there's the thing about a heel. So, but it is also about the head. So this is a curse on both humans and the animal. Why is heel significant here? Has anyone ever gotten bit by a snake? Here, do you know where do snakes usually bite? I don't know that they necessarily go to the heel. But they could have said, the snake will bite your leg. The snake will bite your foot. If you reach down, it will bite your hand. But they chose the heel. Okay? Which is significant. Then the next reference is, you go back on your Safaria sheet, Jess, please. And someone else, this is the most famous reference to heel. Okay, it's Genesis 25. So does someone want to volunteer to read this? And if you can just, you don't have to read the Hebrew, that was really lovely, but if you don't have to, you can read just the English, someone?
I don't mind.
Okay.
Take a shot. When her time to give birth was at hand, there were twins in her room. The first one emerged red, like a hairy mantle all over, so they named him Esau. Then his brother emerged, holding on to the heel of Esau, so they named him Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when they were born.
Okay, you can close the Safaria for a minute. Okay, why was that significant, the heel? Why wasn't he holding on to his arm, his butt, his head? Anyone have any ideas?
You can also share them in the chat if they come to you in a bit.
Okay.
I always had assumed that it was a breech birth.
Why? Because, can you
The heel
explain?
came out first, right? So that something about the story was indicating that the birth was odd, as well as just the situation between the brothers, that the heel was accessible at all.
Doesn't the heel come after the head? I mean, so the head comes out first, and then he's, holding on to the heel. He's coming out second, right? Or, yeah.
Yeah, Matt, I don't know how it could be breech if he's holding on to the heel.
Yeah,
Because-
in terms of that, that's actually the hands being up. But what is striking me is that the heel is far away and behind. And what I'm getting, and I never put these together, but it's sneaky. It's deceptive. You're striking me at my heel because I've gone past you, and then you get me. And the same with Esau. It's emphasizing, not simply that he was second grabbing, coming out, but that he was grabbing at him when he couldn't do anything about it. That seems to me the aspect that he can't do anything.
In other words, it's not, Esav is being pursued. Esav is not wanting this, but Esav got out first. Do you think there's something about this that in the same way a snake strikes someone's heel, that Yaakov is striking Esav in terms of combative? Now, someone in the chat is volunteering. Yes, something is definitely odd. Comments about Achilles' heel. Okay. The interesting thing about the word akev for heel is that it is also the same root that means sly and cunning. And later on in the story, when Jacob steals the birthright, tricks his brother, Esau is fetching to his mother and says, he's done this to me. He's overcome me. He's been so sneaky. Okay, Leah, you have a comment? Thank you.
Yeah, well, he was sneaky, and so was Rebecca. But that's like a little different story. For me, there's something about pulling, if you're struck in the heel, or if you have to live your life on the ground because you've been cursed now as a snake, you're pulled down closer to the earth. And in the birth of Esau and Jacob, Jacob is already, well, he's trying to move into number one position by pulling back on his opponent.
Maybe pulling him back in and then I'll get out first.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah, he's moving towards first place now,
Right.
in any way that he can, right
Okay.
from the beginning.
Thank you. I see Ariel.
And you have to forgive me, I'm out walking, so I'm wearing this silly looking hat. But comment and a question, just because I was like a few minutes late. How did we get into heel, in this, like, where's the root in Deuteronomy of heel? But thinking about heels, even culturally in America, like in the horror movies, like the person who's always about to get away, there's always the monster grabs them at the back by the heel. Like there's something like that's like it's almost a trope in our own culture too. I mean, that could come from the Bible, but that could just be it's like you're about to get away and it's like the last part of you. It'd be like if we were a different creature, that would be our tail. And that's in effect the tail for us.
Not our butt, right? Because we're moving. Because if we were just standing still, maybe it wouldn't be our heel. Maybe it would be our back. But okay. So let's go back at Sepharia and let's look at the other passage that's in Genesis about the heel. So it's a bit lower, 49, Genesis 49. Someone want to read? I can read. Okay, Don, this is the blessing for Don that his father is telling him. Don shall be a serpent by the road, a viper by the path, that bites the horse's heels, so that his rider is thrown backward. Okay, so let's go back out of Sepharia. So this really gets to the point that a number of you are making, that the heel is the last. So Don is going to be sneaky. He's down on the ground. Though here, like Leah, you mentioned that the snake was being punished by being lower, but this is a blessing for Don. Or it's a bizarre type of blessing, right? It's saying you have perfected these sneaky tactics, just like the viper on the path. And you're going to get the horse when the horse doesn't suspect it, right? Because you're coming from behind. Okay, again, there's this issue here of like not on the up and up and not straightforward, but very powerful nevertheless. So what's interesting about the blessing for Don, Robert Alter is a scholar of biblical studies. He's emeritus at Berkeley, and he's a literary scholar. And what he points out, though, is he has some interesting historical insights. And he said that when the Torah describes where all the tribes are situated in the land, Don is moved around. At one point, he's near the sea, and then he's further inland, and then he's up north. So that if there's a historical element to these tribal placements, what you see is that the tribe of Dan was obliged to migrate to the north. It seems like it had a marginal existence in comparison to some of the other tribes. Like Judah is a big tribe. Benjamin is where Jerusalem was built, right? Ephraim, we hear a lot about, but not Dan. And so the description of Dan as someone who can do these lethal attacks from below on the roadside is an image of ambush, guerrilla warfare. And so it suggests that this tribe did not have fortifications like some of the other ones. They had to be sneaky because they were weak. In other words, this type of attack is done by the weak, by the second-born, not the firstborn. So it's a tactic, it's a covert tactic, right? And in feminist studies, historians used to argue that female power was covert power, seduction, sneaky, because they didn't have the big power. They could only do it from behind. They could only be sneaky. The thing about the heel is a heel is really necessary. It's not a scorned body part, but it's vulnerable for two reasons. And one you've already mentioned, it is part of the foot exposed from the rear, so people sneaking up behind or chasing can get it. But the other reason why this heel is vulnerable is because it's not, because of how it's built, because it's the type of tendon. And I'd like you to now look at the Sefaria sheet. I gave you some idioms connected with heel. So, and go up a little bit more. Yeah, there we go. And so when some of you mention culturally, what does heel mean? There are more than this, but I found all these idioms that again evoke that vulnerability, yet strength. At one's heels, close behind, to cool one's heels, right? I'm down at the heels. To lay by the heels. This is like in cowboy fiction. To show a clean pair of heels, to take to one heels, or with your dog, you make your dog heel. And when the dog heels, the dog isn't supposed to be ahead of you. It's supposed to be slightly behind you by your heel, so that the dog knows that you're the one in charge. To be brought to heel. So there are all these elements of the heel that make it, they're all in positions of conflict and potential weakness, right? Okay, so now let's go back to Deuteronomy. Okay, so close so I can see you. So the opening passage in Deuteronomy says, if you obey these rules and observe them carefully, the Lord your God will maintain faithfully for you the covenant. Why use the word heel there? In other words, it's so awkward. They could have said, well, v'haya tishma'un, when you listen, just v'haya, or ka'asher, when. But what does having Akev give you for that? So Leah?
Don't we say that to dogs? Heel, which is I think it's when you want the dog to stand by your side, and then obey the next thing. Help me, somebody who knows about dog training more than I do.
So you're getting to the issue of subservience.
Yeah, subservience, submission, obedience.
When you're obedience, when you really are healed, when you're really God, like, okay, that's an interesting idea.
Yeah, it means follow me. It is really what it means. Heel is follow me. We don't say that because we want a different relationship to our dog when we do the guide dog training. So we say, let's go. We use a statement that's among equal, not a subservient statement. We don't use the heel for that very reason, that it's follow, and what we want is let's go together.
So what Deuteronomy is saying, let me try to use your word as a translation. And when you're following God, or you submit to God and obeying these laws, so it's not saying, it's asking for a subservient attitude. That's what you're saying.
Yes, very much.
Anyone else?
I would just say that an alternative spelling and a different word is heal, to cure, to resolve something. So perhaps A little double entendre on that word might be in order.
That's a nice interpretation to reverse what we've just said. Okay, who else has have their hand up? I see Ariel. Who else? Go for it. Unmute yourself.
Yeah, no, just thinking about without exaggerating each religion, but the classic thing you could say about Islam is, I understand it, means submission. And Israel as a word is, he who struggles with God, literally a name given to Jacob for wrestling with an angel. Now, I don't know if he grabs his heel, but obviously Jacob has that connection with heel. So it's an interesting turn of phrase because it could sort of mean different things. The one thing I can think of that's a little bit different than what we're saying too is we have this kind of head over heel expression, which doesn't necessarily mean, submission in the same way we're talking about, or, it's obviously a point of vulnerability, but it's also sort of something topsy-turvy. And Jacob Esau is kind of topsy-turvy in that way. So I don't know exactly what that means in the context, but something a little different.
Okay. I love this reference to Jacob and the heel and the wrestling, because when Jacob is wounded, it isn't in the heel, it's in the thigh. It's in that thigh sinew, that sciatic nerve, which is actually, down your lower back, down your thigh, your rear end, and down toward your knee, but not your heel. I don't think the sciatic nerve goes down to your heel, but there's something about the leg. Leah, did you want to add something here? Oh, no.
No, sorry.
So the thing that's so interesting about this, this issue, one way, I think there's another way of looking at the heel in terms of the beginning of our portion. And that is back to, I don't remember who it was who said, it's about following. That if you do this, that will happen. That B follows A. And the sentence, if you obey the rules, then God will maintain faithfully all of the covenant that he did. So you could do another in consequence of you doing A, B will happen. In consequence of you doing the mitzvot, you'll have nice rewards. Or following on the heels of you doing commandments, good things will happen. Right? So I don't know how to work into this head over heels business, because that seems to be a sort of ecstasy, whereas this is sort of a warning. And another name for the book of Devarim in traditional literature is Sefer Tochacha, which is the book of rebuke, because so much of it is Moses warning the Israelites, if you don't do it, bad things are going to happen. If you do it, good things are going to happen. David, I see your hand up. You want to unmute yourself?
Well, yeah, I along with your warning, the thing that always struck me about the heel is it's foundational. It's at the very bottom. It's a foundation. Like much like a building, you can have a big skyscraper and everybody's in awe of that. But if you take out the foundation stone, the whole thing can come down. I've had a couple of problems with my legs over the years. I had an ACL issue, but I could still walk. I had a lot of issues, but boy, when I got plantar fasciitis in my heel, I was incapacitated, completely incapacitated. So when it's in Genesis, it says, and you shall strike at their heel. To me, I will take you down.
Yeah, that'll take you down. It's such a small, narrow part of our body, but it's so crucial. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
I don't think of the heel.
It's the Achilles heel.
Right, the Achilles heel, right? Okay, so now what I want to do, these are great comments. I want to go a little bit further. So Jess, if you can open Deuteronomy 7 again, but lines 12 to 26. What I want you to all focus in on, while somebody reads, please, can I have a volunteer? This is in the Sefaria text itself, not the share sheet.
Hold on one moment and I will get there.
So, and meanwhile, I hope somebody volunteers to read in the English, because while one volunteer reads, the rest of you, I want you to listen or watch and see what are all the dire consequences that are mentioned that could happen if you do not follow the rules. Okay? So
Jody, do you mind sending me the link if you have it open? Because I don't
I
have access
can
to
share.
Safari. Great.
I can share screen. So let me go share screen. Share. Is that open? Good. Okay, so there's like 10, 15 lines here. And it starts with 12. Oops. Here we go. Let's just look at the English, okay? Just for the sake of 7:12 to 7:26. Do I have a volunteer to read? And I want you to focus on the negative, everybody. What bad things might happen?
I introduced
Okay,
the
David,
negatives.
please. Thank you.
ECAP. And if you do obey these rules and observe them carefully, the Lord your God will maintain faithfully for you the covenant that he made on oath with your fathers. He will favor you and bless you and multiply you. He will bless the issue of your womb and the procedure of your soil, your new grain and wine and oil, the calving of your herd and the lambing of your flock in the land that he swore to your fathers to assign to you. You shall be blessed above all other peoples. There shall be no sterile male or female among you or among your livestock. The Lord will ward off from you all sickness. He will not bring upon you any of the dreadful diseases of Egypt about which you know, but will inflict them upon all your enemies. You shall destroy all the peoples that the Lord your God delivers to you, showing them no pity. And you shall not worship their gods, for that would be a snare to you. Should you say to yourselves, these nations are more numerous than we, how can we dispossess them? You need have no fear of them. You have but to bear in mind what the Lord your God did to Pharaoh and all the Egyptians. The wondrous acts that you saw with your own eyes, the signs and the portents, the mighty hand and the outstretched arm by which the Lord your God liberated you. Thus will the Lord your God do to all peoples you now fear. The Lord your God will also send a plague against them until those who are left in hiding perish before you. Do not stand in dread of them, for the Lord your God is in your midst, a great and awesome God. The Lord your God will dislodge those peoples before you little by little. You will not be able to put an end to them at once, else the wild beasts would multiply to your hurt. The Lord your God will deliver them up to you, throwing them into utter panic until they are wiped out. He will deliver their kings into your hand, and you shall obliterate their name from under the heavens. No man shall stand up to you until you have wiped them out. You shall consign the images of their gods to the fire. You shall not covet the silver and gold on them and keep it for yourselves, lest you be ensnared thereby, for it is abhorrent to the Lord your God. You must not bring an abhorrent thing into your house, or you will be proscribed like it. You must reject it as abominable and abhorrent, for it is proscribed.
Thank you. This is a scary reality.
Yeah.
Because all the things that God's going to bless you, don't worry, you're not going to be defeated. But there are enemies there, right? So what is there to fear? What things are around here? Right? There's infertility. There's disease. There's enemies. Wild animals. Kings. So Moses is trying to reassure people, but at the same time mentioning all these horrible things that will happen. And so the portion starts out with saying, hey, but if you follow God, bad things won't happen. Okay? And there's an even more crucial statement that's very direct in this portion about that causation. It's part of the Shema. Now, when we think of the Shema, it's Shema Yisrael, that one line, and we think of Ve'ahavta, but there's that long middle paragraph. And it's actually not that long. It's in the portion, and I'm going to share it. It's in Deuteronomy 11. It's just 3 or 4 sentences. Okay, 13 to 21. Okay, try not to get dizzy here. And I'll read it. Okay. And it doesn't start with Akev, but it has the same Vihaya im Shamoah. If then you obey the commandments that I enjoin upon you this day, loving the Lord your God and serving him with all your heart and soul, I will grant the rain for your land in season, the early rain and the late. You shall gather in your new grain and wine and oil. I will also provide grass in the fields for your cattle, and thus you shall eat your fill. Take care not to be lured away to serve other gods and bow down to them, for the Lord's anger will flare up against you. He will shut the skies so that there'll be no rain, and the ground will not yield its produce, and you will soon perish from the good land that the Lord is assigning to you. Therefore, impress these words upon your very heart, bind them as a sign on your hand, and let them serve as a symbol on your forehead, and teach them to your children, reciting them when you stay at home and when you're away, when you lie down and when you get up, and inscribe them on your doorposts of your house and on your gates, to the end that you and your children may endure in the land that the Lord swore to your fathers to assign to them, as long as there's heaven over the earth. So that's our Shema. That's the middle part of the Shema. It has that principle of causation. And it's a difficult passage to read. It's difficult theologically. Why? Or is it difficult? When you see that in the Shema, what's your reaction? Who's David?
Well, I'm for once very comfortable giving my reaction because I'm talking to an historian. I mean, this is very much the God of Israel attacking the gods of Samaria in particular and all the gods of that area, which were gods of nature. And the biggest thing they were afraid of was, just gods depriving their agricultural livelihoods and all those things. So that taking away rain and doing those kinds of things is about as threatening as those gods could be. And here is the God of Israel asserting himself and saying, I'm more powerful than them, essentially.
Okay, good. But that's a great interpretation. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, Kathy, and good, thank you.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've always had problems with it because this sort of reward and punishment business. I mean, it kind of makes sense, but it in fact doesn't happen, and that this whole, it's the whole book of Job sort of where people who seem to be good people seem to be punished, and people who do terrible things seem not to be punished. And what do you do with that? And it's just not as kind of neat as that kind of formulation. But I have to say that it used to always irritate me to go through the second paragraph in the Shema, and so I'd always be kind of irritated. And then we switched for a while from a conservative shul to a reform shul, and they left it out, right? And for a long, I guess now it's back in some versions of the Reform Prayer Book, but they just left it out. But the funny thing is that then I started to miss it, because it was almost like I always used that as an opportunity to think about that issue of reward and punishment, and what did I think of that really? And I always kind of, used that as my time to think about it. And then when it was missing, it was just gone. So anyway,
Sentimental reason.
and then the other funny thing about it is that in the New Reform Prayer Book, this Mishkan Tefillah, they actually refer to the third paragraph in the Shema, but there's no second paragraph.
They talk about it.
But
Because
they still consider it sort of there, even though they leave it out.
So thank you. You know, so David, if you want to sit and think about history, so fine, it might make sense in a historical context. But for today, and even back then, Job, like you said, Job was challenging it too. But how does it work for us today? So Randy, you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I read this and I feel, I don't know, kind of the mixing roller coaster feelings of great joy. Oh, these things are going to be promised us, and a tremendous terror. Your father's going to wipe you off the face of the earth if you don't do these things. You will perish. And, you know, we've seen in other parts where, you know, he has designated for people who've made transgressions, you know, to be cast out, to be stoned, you know, wipe them out. And it's a wonderful and terrifying thing for me to be reading this. Scary, basically.
The question is, and then the challenge is, do we believe it? Is it useful to read this? You know, I mean, it evokes those feelings, and for Kathy, it evokes those questions that you may want to ruminate. But the question is it a helpful theology to have? Why is it there in the Shema? You know, Matt, you want to say something?
One of the things that struck me, and this goes back to other, you know, like Fraser and stuff, is that there's this gives us agency, because we can see it as God will punish us, or we can see it as, if I do these things, the world will be good. So it gives me control over the rain. It gives me control over the harvest, as opposed to I am helpless and the rains come or they don't come and my actions are meaningless. I think that to some large extent, our actions are meaningless because we don't control the rain, but it is a helpful theology to say I have some control. You know, somewhere between the laws of attraction and everything is helpful. You know, if I do good stuff, maybe there will be some good stuff.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? You know, there's agency for the Israelites here.
I definitely see that there's agency, but the question is it accurate? And that is exactly what the book of Job was saying. No, it's not accurate. You only think that you have some control. But here's the thing, and I think I want to connect it back to the heel. A belief that if you do A, B will happen is part of maturity. Every baby learns you drop the ball, it goes on the floor. And then, oh my goodness, and then mommy picks it up. And you keep doing that. So it's part of just our basic knowledge that X causes Y. It's an important principle of life. We have to learn it. But what we've also learned is that bad things happen to good people. Good people doing mitzvot die. Bad things can happen to them. People can cheat them, right? That you might want to think that you have agency over the course of your life, but you may not. But the thing that's so interesting about this principle of causation is the Torah is trying to convince us. You can control your fate, like Matt says. You can control your fate if you do mitzvot. But when the Torah doesn't hold the threat over our head, different language is used about our decision making. The language of freedom to act properly does not reference the award, the reward, or it doesn't even reference the heel. It doesn't use akev, but the entire foot is used as the metaphor. as a deliberate walking. Put one foot before the other. Choose the right path, right? When God first called Abram, he was not Abraham yet. When he was living in Mesopotamia, God said, Lech lecha, go, walk, leave this land. It wasn't scurry. It wasn't sneak into Canaan, right? It was, you can traverse the land and see it. So when you act because you don't want to have a punishment, but you're acting because you want to act that way, come what may, it's a different type of decision. It is more full of faith, right? I'm going to do this whether I'm rewarded or not. I'm going to do these mitzvot and maybe rain doesn't come, but I'm going to do them. I'm going to act ethically even if no one is watching me to award me, right? So it seems to me that the principle, I mean, here I am critiquing the Shema, but I am, that the principle of our decision, that when we make decisions, the decisions that we hold deep in our heart are made with our feet instead of with our heels, where we're saying, I'm going to choose this way of walking in the world. And in fact, in Jewish thought, we have that, halakha. Halakha means Jewish law, but it's also basically, it's our way of going through the world. It's our deliberate choice to follow these rules or our interpretation of these rules, to walk a certain way, to go through life a certain way. And maybe we as liberal Jews do not want to make a commitment to this rabbinic halakha, but we do affirm the importance of committing to our own kind of liberal halakha, our own liberal ethics and way of doing ritual and so on. And here we are. It's the season before Rosh Hashanah. We're in the 20th day of the month of Av. We're leading up to the Hebrew month of Elul, where we're preparing for that new Rosh Hashanah. And there are all sorts of lovely ways to prepare. But one way is to say, I'm going to get rid of that idea that God is sitting there inscribing on a book who's going to live and who's going to die randomly, right? Or looking at, I'm going to say, this is how I want to be. And take that way. Now, you notice that in my language, I've taken God out of the picture. But I don't necessarily have to take spirituality out of the picture or the sacred. And so on the Sefaria sheet, I'm giving you, and Jess, so I'd like you to put up the Sefaria sheet, please. I'm giving you a translation of the Shema, and it was a translation of the whole Shema by Marcia Falk, who's a liberal Jew. And it's a beautiful rendition of the Shema in English with symbols evoking the Shema in Hebrew. Okay, we'll get there. You lost it?
Apologies, we're having some technical difficulties. I'm at the ECAR office. So
Maybe you can find it on mine.
One moment.
Hold on. I can find it on mine.
Okay.
Let me share my screen, I think.
Oh. I found it. We got it.
Okay, go for it.
Good. I'm gonna go for it. And you've all been waiting for. Here we go.
Okay, so go down. I'm going to read this just in the interest of time, but I want you to notice some of, like I said, the symbols where she connects this to the Hebrew. And notice she's not talking about God, he, but the sacred force. The divine abounds everywhere and dwells in everything. The many are one. That's the Shema. Now Ve'ahavta. Loving life and its mysterious source with all my heart and all my spirit and all my sense and strength, I take upon myself to follow the wisdom in the Torah, celebrating the historic events of my people and their ways of making life holy, to care for the earth and those who live upon it. Go up a bit. Those who live upon it. To pursue justice and peace, to love kindness and compassion. I will teach this to our children throughout the passage of the day, as I dwell in my home and as I go on my journey, from the time I rise until I fall asleep. And may my actions be faithful to my words, that our children's children may live to know. Truth and kindness have embraced, peace and justice have kissed and are one. So for her, again, why do you do things? Not because of a reward or a punishment, but it's to connect, to follow the wisdom of the Torah, to connect to the divine, which abounds everywhere and dwells in everything, to make many into one. I know, I love Marcia Fox's works too. So, actually, let's go back to that. Let's go a little bit more on that. Can I show you? I want to connect this to the words of the Shema. It got away. There we go. So here is, instead of V'ahavta et Adonai Eloheka, instead of loving God, you're loving life and its source. And who's its source? Well, it could be God, but she just wants to leave it as a mystery because ultimately it is a mystery. And she talks not just about V'ahavta et Adonai Eloheka b'chol lavavcha, with all your heart, spirit, sense, and so on, right? She doesn't say just to follow mitzvot, which is what the Shema says. She also says the historic events of my people. So for her and for many people, what makes you Jewish and what you're connecting to are the holidays, the history, the storytelling, the community, that sense of community is in her language, I think, more than it is in the V'ahavta. And go down a little bit, Jess. Instead of saying V'haya im Shemo, if you don't do this, and you do this, it's not there. It's not there. I'm just gonna do it. And there's this lovely wish at the end. May my actions be faithful to words so that my children will live to know. Not, I know if I'm doing this, I will have living grandchildren and they'll know it. No, it's, may it happen. May it happen. And we can get off there from it. Go a little bit further. I'm sorry, go back. So she leaves it more open. And I'm thinking I should print that out and put that in my Siddur. So I want you to go down one more passage I put in here. One of my favorite writers is Tzvi Friedman, who used to live in LA for a while, and I got to know him. He's a rabbi. He works for Chabad. And one of the things he's done on Chabad.org is, which is their website, is he puts the rabbis' meditations and teachings into modern language. And in so doing, in the way that Chabad does, tries to draw in secular or non-observant Jews to appreciate the wisdom of this Rebbe, and then maybe connect to Judaism in another way. Okay. My voice is tired. Who could someone like to read this last passage?
I'm happy to read it.
Okay, Kate, thanks.
Free choice is the quintessential expression of God, for God alone is truly free. God reaches within the human being, and so we too become free to choose our path. Darkness, confusion, and the possibility of evil. All this then has
Purpose of its own. We're
I think
losing
we
it.
lost you a little, Kate. Judy, you might wanna.
You froze. Kate, I'm gonna read it because I think your voice froze there. Darkness, confusion, and the possibility of evil. All this then has a purpose of its own. It provides a stage for us to find God within ourselves, seen only when we make the right choice, all on our own. So, how does this connect? Can someone see how this connects to this idea or contradicts the idea of that was in the second paragraph of the Shema? Do it because you'll get an award. Bad things won't happen to you. Right? Does someone want to add? Someone want to give some insight into this? Does this make you feel better? reading that reading that meditation? The darkness, confusion, and evil has a purpose? Okay, let's see if we can hear from you. Unmute yourself, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. What I like is both in Marsha Fox and in the meditation that it's our response, that we are accepting the responsibility. It's not an obligation. It's not a do this, get this, but we are accepting the responsibility for the broadness of the Jewish people. And what I particularly love about Marsha's was that it says in our children. So that those of us, I mean, I don't have children, so I like that I am responsible for our children in whatever way I can be, even though I don't have children of my own. So those are two thoughts that just struck me.
Very nice. Yeah. Leah, thank you. Leah?
Yeah, Rabbi Freeman's meditation is so vast. It is so empowering for me. It really it seems to be an organic outgrowth of the Shema that goes beyond political correctness somehow in a way that is very attractive to me.
Does it even seem Jewish? You're free to do these. That's the interesting thing about Tzvi Freeman's. When he writes about what the Rebbe said, I said, is this really the Rebbe saying this? Is it Tzvi? I mean, Tzvi is a Chabad Rebbe too, but it's like, you are free. And there's no promise there. There's evil. And maybe going back to something, Kathy, you said earlier, that maybe I don't really like that second paragraph of the Shema, but it makes me think. It makes me have to go within and see, what do I really believe? What's in there? And maybe that's all, that's so important, I love this. I think there's so much in both the Marsha Falk and the Deuteronomy and in the Tzvi Freeman. But the second sentence there, God breathes within the human being, so we too become free to choose our path home. So there's God there in us. And we have to, but it's the choice element is really interesting. There's that choice. So we're running out of time. I think if I want to sort of try to sum up, I want to try to sum up the lesson in a way that you're given an ethic in the Parsha about if you act this way, that will happen, which is a crucial ethic. We should know that our actions have consequences, and we should be okay with that when we're making that action, to know the consequence that will happen. We must act deliberately, and like Matt said, we must act with agency. We have agency. That's good. On the other hand, the Torah also gives us the language of choice. We must choose a path. We're choosing good, we're choosing evil, but I guess at a certain level, we're finding our way home, and the Torah is a roadmap for us. It isn't an exact one. It's open to all sorts of interpretation, but a way to sort of prepare, I think, for the holidays, for the month of Av, for Elul, for our life, is to try to figure out, what do I stand for? What do I believe in? What's going to be meaningful for me, and for the world I'm in, and for my children? And so that when I'm walking, I'm not looking fearfully behind for the snake that might get me. I'm not walking as if I have to grab things sneakily, but so that I'm standing firmly, walking deliberately on a path I want to follow. Okay? So thank you for your participation, and thank you for helping me think more about this. And it's a daunting task, I have to tell you, as I lay it out there. And thank goodness there's at least a month or so to go.